that email make sense, Mark?
Yeah, yep.
Thank you for, I kind of remembered that as soon as you sent it to.
Yeah, I saw that it was expired, which I thought was interesting.
But it is, I think I read that the same way, right? And like, it's just interesting how quickly priorities and markets can change, right? Because it was kind of targeted toward kind of different goals at that time.
Looked like it, yep.
It is 5:30 o'clock. Oh, just turned. Are you ready, Mr. City Manager?
Yes.
Take your time.
No, we're good.
You're good? All right, all right. Good deal. Well, let's get rolling with the study session this evening. The first item on the agenda is public comment. If there's a member of the public who would like to speak to council, this will be your opportunity in the meeting to do that. This is a study session, so we limit public comment to 3 minutes for each person, and you get one shot at making public comment. As always, this is one-way communication, so you will be speaking to us. We do not answer questions or respond to those that are making public comment at this time. If you would like to make a public comment, please come forward to the podium, state your name and address for the record. And again, there are 3 lights in front of me. There's a red light, a yellow light, and a green light. Green light means you're doing well on time. Yellow light means you have 1 minute left, and red light means your time has expired, and we are strict about those rules. Now, if there's anyone here who would like to speak to council at this time, please come forward. And would you please state your name and address for the record?
And I will say, sorry to interrupt, Mr. Mayor and presenter. Oh,
You got it?
the system just booted up in the last second, so
All right.
never mind me.
I'm getting a nod from Mr. Van Dyken in the back going, yeah, I made sure that had happened. So give him a second to make sure he's got it set the right way for the timing.
We're
And
set.
you're good to go.
My name is Sarah Brown. My address is 266 Blue Isle Drive. I attend Westover High School, and I'm a member of the Holland Youth Advisory Council. I want to thank the City Council for the recent passing of the Anti-Discrimination Ordinance protecting rights for LGBTQIA and other individuals. It means a lot to myself and many other people in our community to see that Holland values equality and inclusivity. And I want to encourage the council to keep these values in mind when making future decisions for our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here who would like to address council at this time? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment period. Next item on the agenda, update on recycling cart program status. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Council. I know Councilmember Trethewey will listen to this in interest, and I'm sure he won't mistreat you, Aaron, but Aaron Thalenwood is going to come forward and give a presentation on the status of where we stand with the CART program and some grant money that we gotten. So he's going to come forward right after I spray the podium. Give him a hard time?
That doesn't mean you have to stop. I got, I think, 10 minutes.
Well, he's got good news to share tonight, so you better not give him a hard time, Mike.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, thank you for allowing me to continue coming into this room. I do appreciate it. So I'm not going to go too much into a lot of the historical context here. I think we've covered it enough in the past, unless anyone has any clear and burning questions as far as why we're moving forward the way we are. What I'm bringing forward to you for your consideration tonight is an effort that the city staff has been working on for quite a while in conjunction with the hard and dedicated efforts of the Materials Management Task Force. That group has been rocking it out. They've been working diligently, and because of their hard work, we've been able to make this process as smooth as I could have ever hoped it to be. Tonight, we're reviewing 2 grant awards we've received, both from the Recycling Partnership as well as the Michigan Environment, we'll call it EGLE, Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, I believe is the acronym these days, formerly DEQ. Both grant awards are for the purchase of recycling carts to be distributed curbside directly to residents' homes. And in addition, with the recycling partnership, they also provide an additional $1 per household of education funding. So when we're looking at the Eagle grant, we're looking at $267,646, and the recycling partnership, $151,856 of grant funding going towards this program. So when we're looking at the differences between the two programs, overall, they're very much in line. Eagle and the recycling partnership intentionally work together to make sure their program requirements and their interests are in line with the state's, and Eagle does a little bit vice versa, just to make sure that these grant programs are as supportive of one another as possible. The goal of both entities is to make recycling accessible to communities. So with that, Eagle only strictly funds carts, whereas the recycling partnership will fund carts and education. In addition, the recycling partnership provides pro bono design services, material support in that regard. They value that at about $125,000 of their time and effort. They both also require the carts to be equipped with RFID chips. Those chips, I think some of you have heard of them, some of them aren't, some of you may have not. They allow us to collect data, or potentially collect data at the curb related to individual usage rates, so weights, tonnage, that kind of thing. Gives us clear definition of trash versus recycling at the curbside. We can make those as comprehensive or as bare bones as we want, but it allows us to collect more data to kind of help reinforce our current ongoing data collection efforts. With these funds, we're going to be purchasing 9,491 carts to go curbside immediately. And as part of this overall program, we'll be reporting back tonnage, collection, participation rates, contamination rates, kind of all the baseline data that we're currently collecting back to both organizations. And I want to kind of draw back to that point just because of the efforts and the foresight that this council has had as far as making those decisions, being diligent about our data collecting efforts. It's because of that front end work that we were an ideal fit for these grants. Early on, through some of my sidebar channels, there was a lot of hope that we would be going for these funds, and because of the efforts that we put in, it made us a slam dunk case. So I just want to commend this council for that in that regard. So the total grant funding between the two organizations is $419,000, or $419,502. The original estimate for the total cost of the project was about $512,000. So as of right now, based on that original estimate, we're looking at approximately $93,012 out of pocket for the city. That can change one way or the other based on how CART RFPs are returned and CART bids are returned. So the CART costs could go up, they could go down. With the cost of petroleum, the way that it's been, we're optimistic that we're going to benefit from that, but I wouldn't want to wager a guess one way or the other definitively. And then regardless of how the bids come back, the award amounts will not change. So if we get substantially lower bids, we don't have to go back to the partnership, or we don't have to go back to Eagle and recalculate our award. The award will stay the same, so that'd be better for us if they came back lower, fingers crossed. In addition, we are also purchasing a fleet of just stock carts, probably about 500 or so. Those will not be funded through these grants, and those are just inventory for us to keep on hand for replacement over the coming years. So in a nutshell, that's the two grant contracts, and I'd be happy to open up for any questions that you might have.
Any questions from council? Yeah, Dave,
I have a question.
fire away, sir.
Thank you. I know that we originally agreed or passed the 96-gallon container, and I also understanding may well be a moot point at this juncture. But at least I've gotten a number of communications from residents, particularly condo owners, who are anticipating a problem with that size of a container. And I know we've committed to that. But if that turns out to be a real problem for some of our residents, is some thought given to allowing a smaller container, or are we pretty much committed to the bigger one, or what's up with that?
So at this point, so just to be clear first, just within the context of these grants, these can only be used for 96-gallon carts
Okay.
on a every other week pickup. But that being said, as you've gotten communications, so have I. It's something we've been discussing at the task force level. And Mike, you're going to fact check me on this. But where we landed was, I think the ideal situation would be, the ideal scenario would be to roll out full tilt with the 96-gallon cart program as is, allow for some period of time, whether it's 6 months, whether it's a year, whether it's more or less than that, something along those lines, to just try it out and see how things shake out, see if those fears do come to fruition. If they do, and it's something that's just unworkable, then at that point, we can have a discussion at the city level about procuring those carts on our own. I will say that is, especially with condo associations, the number one concern that communities face when transitioning to a carted program. And every community that I have spoken to so far have more or less landed to the fact that it goes away when people realize it's not as much of a concern. There's this idea that let's take our smallest cart, the 32-gallon container, is drastically smaller than the 96. When you look at the actual footprint, there's not that much of a difference. So it's more on height than width.
Well, I know that we hope that people are going to recycle so much that anything smaller than a 96 will be inadequate, but it's good to know. I'm glad that some thoughts are coming to it.
Yep, and that door is not closed on that. So if we want to go that route, we have that ability.
All right, thank you.
Lynn, did you have a question?
We talked a little while back about accountability in the recycling program. I wonder if you could just refresh my memory about, do you remember that? There was a constituent who asked about how we keep the company accountable for doing the actual recycling. So I wonder if you could address that.
Absolutely. So we were very intentional, and this council made it a priority very early on, that we're structuring our contract around accountability. So we require a lot of things that many communities don't. We require to know which landfill and which recycling facilities that our contractors are using. We require recycling tonnages by month, and we require basically an ongoing accounting of carts that our contractor has on hand for our city-owned carts. So they have to maintain those inventories. They have to provide those reports to us, and in turn, we provide those reports and report out to the state. So we've got a pretty tight contract as far as what we require them to report. And I think the way that it's structured, it would be more disadvantage to them to try and pull any funny business. And then if we do have things that don't come up to muster, we have levers that we can pull, including assigning liquidated damages and up to, and including discontinuation of the contract. So we put a lot of safeguards in there. If someone really wants to, I'm sure anyone's going to find a way around those, but our contract is pretty robust in that regard. Absolutely.
Mike?
Well, first of all, I want to say Aaron is being very, very modest. He is a taskmaster when it comes to the materials group. He toes a pretty tight line and runs a very good meeting. So we have a lot of chance to talk. Lynn, one more thing that goes along with what Aaron said is we have been known to do spot checks out at the MRF just for verification. Popping in unannounced and saying, hey, we want to see the operation. So there was a lot of questions with the yellow bags, a lot of rumors going around that they were going straight to the landfill. although that was proven to be not true. Even so much more with the carts. Dave, back to your point, yes, I have received those same calls from the condos. The statement that Aaron made about other communities running into that same thing, we're not all by ourselves here, was collaborated with the recycling partnership. She's worked with an awful lot of communities that have come up against the same thing. We kicked around a few ideas, so we do have a quote-unquote Plan B, but until we know that we need to go to that Plan B, the whole idea is to get those 96s out there and then, as Aaron said, see how it shakes out. One thing I also wanted to point and put an exclamation point behind was Aaron said early on that we were sought out to make sure that we applied for these grants because of the programs that we have. That is definitely a feather in the cap for Aaron and for the city for the type of program that we do. We know that we are on the forefront of things here. There's a number of communities that are sitting back and watching and want to emulate what we're doing here because we're doing such a great job because of the participation rate that we have and the aspiration that we want to even, dare I say, double that participation rate. That's what our goal is. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible. I'm extremely excited about these grants, extremely excited about the potential that we have for the recycling, and the educational component is going to be very, very important. So those have to be running side by side. So Aaron, fantastic job.
If it was just by myself, we wouldn't be where we are. So I do have to give credit where credit is due. So thank you.
Jay?
And the education funding, maybe I missed that. Is that out of those funds as well?
Correct.
Do you have some sense of how much is allocated toward making sure this community is ready to accept this considerably different way of going at things, especially, I think, when it comes to the example that I think I used before. When I make a lot of chili and I empty my kidney bin and I just throw it in that container, that's not gonna work, right?
Right.
That's still considered contaminated.
Correct.
So there's a whole level of education. We're not using bags, throw it right in there, but here's what you gotta do before you do or it does no good. Now what kind of resources are we allocating toward that component?
So out of this grant, we're looking at a total of about 10,000. So give or take. Now that's not total. That's just out of these grant funds. Within the solid waste budget, we've allocated, I think it's $30,000 or $40,000. I'd have to confirm that number of just direct education and outreach materials. In addition to that, we've established funds for specific items like updating our website, so making it kind of more up and basically cutting edge, like plug-in for our current platform. So it's going to be really nice, really sharp, really user-friendly, and really packed to the gills with information. On the carts, there will be informational material as well. So we don't want to tread into the waters of outlining what goes in the cart, but more how. So empty, clean, and dry. It's going to be printed right on your cart label, saying if you're recycling, you want your material empty, you want it clean, you don't want those chili residue in there, and you want it dry. In addition, the recycling partnership, like I said, they're putting in $125,000 of promo design work and marketing materials, as well as marketing guidance. And then, like I said, our $30,000 commitment on the solid waste budget for just strictly education outreach. So
Okay. Those decals that you mentioned are on the each canister that you can scan. You're gonna know who lives in that house and who that's been assigned to.
So what we can collect on that information, and that's going to be, there's going to be some room, or there's going to be some discussion as far as how targeted we want to get with that. So basically, the things that are going to be in that chip will be the serial number on the cart, and then some sort of location. We can do address, we can do GPS, but it's kind of critical on a couple levels. One, like I said, if we want to really start ramping up our data collection as far as what's being done curbside, that's critical data to have. But two, also if carts tend to float away, at a scan, the driver can say, hey, this cart is at X location, it needs to be at Y. So it helps us with accounting, locating carts and just maintenance of our overall inventory as well. The RFID chips, they're required to be installed as part of the grants, but they are not required to be used. So it's basically what they're looking to do with these grants is standardize the technology, which at this point is pretty standardized. I think we would probably end up paying more for carts without the chips than we would with them in. It's up to us on how, when, and how in-depth to use those carts, or use those chips.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking at first, you know, the term accountability's been used. If the if a driver picked up a huge packet of recyclable materials, and they're essentially unrecyclable because of the way they've been done, could you send certain people a letter saying, you know, you're not doing a good job? I even don't want to, maybe it's against.
No, so
Accountability in this thing's gonna be huge.
yeah, and so that is a possibility there, but always when I get into data collection and accountability, there's some really pointed conversations we have to have. So there are communities who do that, who use it very specifically, and the driver can see what they're dumping in, so they don't have to get out and say like, oh, like if they tip a recycling cart and it's full of cinder blocks, we can flag an account that way. So there's ways we can tie that to address, we can tie it to account, but like I said, there's probably some conversations that we want to have as far as what's most important for our community to have in that regard. So, and then with this as well, with the RFPs that are going to be going out shortly, the onus will be on the cart provider to install, to program the RFID chips, to provide a database back to the City of Holland and our contractor, or to the City of Holland to provide to our contractor, and then also assembly and delivery of those carts curbside. So our people won't be delivering carts, Republic's people won't be delivering carts, the cart producer will be delivering carts curbside.
Okay.
And then that database comes back to us to use however we see fit.
Thanks.
Raul, did you have a comment? No, you're good. Anyone else? Yeah, Nikki.
I just wanted to say I'm glad to hear that you're considering a trial period for that size of container, because their individual circumstances may dictate. So thank you.
Absolutely. And one more point on that, we still do have programs set up under our current contract called it's called backdoor pickup. So for those residents who physically are unable to take their trash to the curb, we do have that collection method as well. So the hauler gets out of the truck, they pick up the bin, they pull it curbside, and they take it back. So those options exist in our current contract, and they'll exist under the recycling program.
Excellent.
Great. Anyone else? No? All right. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Thank you all very much.
Excuse me,
Oh.
just a comment.
Oh, yeah.
That occurs to me. I could envision some educational videos starring Jay Peters. I think
Done.
that would be very,
Mhm.
I
And
would,
the chili
I would
can.
watch that.
And the
Yep.
chili can.
Yeah,
You can pick the
Aaron,
music too,
chili
Jay.
can.
Keep it in mind.
Next item up is the review of the Housing Development Support Policy. Mr. Van Beek.
Yeah, and before I spray the podium, and forget about that, so Mark Cornelis, before you go up there, make me spray the podium, okay? But you will see the next two items have to do about housing and economic development. And I think the timing is right to also make what I think is a really exciting announcement. You all were very kind in recognizing a need that we believe we had, particularly with the retirement of Tim Vogley, and that it created an immediate kind of opening and need, because for the veterans of the group, I think we've kind of said, I don't know how to say the 3, 3, and 3, the veterans and the...
Seasoned, not so well seasoned, and newbies. How about that?
I'm not going to call you those groups.
Can we vote on that?
We can vote on that.
Yeah,
we'll
yeah, I'll
we'll
let
come
you
up with
figure
something
that out.
Committee will come up with good names.
But, you know, Tim stepped in, I think, for an extended period of time of doing a really important role for the city with partnering with Lakeshore Advantage, but really doing some targeting economic development work, but then also managing what can be some really complicated incentive programs and those types of things. And historically, the city always had an assistant city manager, kind of top-level executive in that role, in Greg Robinson. But between the Great Recession and still the cut in staff and all those types of things, Tim picked that up and did a great job. But now as we start to have a lot more development, and as Lynn has come on and is really doing a fantastic job, we identified really wanting to clear that up. But yet with COVID and all the uncertainty that we have there, and certainly some concern that I have in out years, I think we have a great opportunity here. And quite frankly, a target person that I had to talk about that opening is sitting right over my shoulder here in Ryan Kilpatrick. And in some discussions with Ryan and with his Housing Next board, but also with technically his employer, the United Way, we have arranged to have a professional services agreement with them so that Ryan is going to be able to help us in economic development and some sustainability work for the remainder of this fiscal year, with the ability to extend that into the future. And I think that's just a great opportunity for us. It's get someone seasoned that can come in that knows, you know, our environment. But let me read just a few things about Ryan's background. With a background in public policy, development, finance, planning, and economic development, he previously worked for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation as the lead project manager for the entire West Michigan region, which I interpret to be all these incentives that we talk about, and are really, he was the one at the state that was the expert at those programs and knowing how to use those programs and really being strategic in the use of those programs. Also a certified professional with planning's American Institute of Certified Planners, certified economic development finance professional, and he holds a master's degree in design thinking from Ferris State and a BA degree in community development from Grand Valley State University. So we're excited about this. I think it's something that's good for us, but it also retains Housing Next as being a really crucial force for change in our region too. So now seemed like as good as time as any to let you know that. And then also Ryan's here to kind of add to the team as we present these next two items. Mark Cornelis, though, is going to present on the housing development support policy, which we've talked to you a couple times about, and we've continued to make some good changes, and I think we're at the point where we would be recommending approval, and Mark will go through that now.
Great, and while you're cleaning the podium, I want to say on behalf of council, welcome, Ryan. It's great that you're willing to do that. We have a lot of work for you to do. So we're excited to get started. You're gonna start right away tomorrow morning, right? Is that what the deal is? First thing, or even tonight yet? Can we get you moved in tonight? All right. Any other comments from council in regard to Ryan Kilpatrick doing the professional services agreement? We're excited. Great. Good to have you, and it's good to see a good, friendly, familiar, and very talented face. We appreciate it. Mark.
Great.
Good
Mayor,
to see
City
you.
Council, yep, thanks for having me back. And yes, as Keith said, you know, you addressed this topic exactly 2 months ago on August 12. So I think the charge at the conclusion of that meeting, and the word that was used, was to tweak the set of documents that we had. So I think that we've done that in the spirit of what was requested. So I'm just going to quickly summarize or highlight the changes that have been made since you took a last look at these documents. And I'll address them one by one. There's the set of documents grew from 3 to 4. The first document is the policy document, and no changes have been made to that document. The second document, which I refer to now as the incentives and guidelines document, we kind of just shortened the title a little bit just for clarity. And then 2 paragraphs have been added. One and I think the document that you're looking at, every change should be indicated in red. But we added a paragraph on process, just to kind of, again, clarify for developers what this is all about. And then there was an additional paragraph added relative to the brownfield redevelopment incentive option, again, to clarify, in particular to clarify that that particular incentive is available for non-residential projects. The assessment tool, just some formatting sorts of changes. There's space added under each component for staff to indicate their rationale for whoever happens to be scoring that document. We talked about that last time as well, who would likely be doing that. But there's space there for that staff person to indicate the rationale for the score that was provided. And there was removal of that threshold that I think it was set at 22 or 23. And again, based on your conversation and the interest in kind of maximizing flexibility, we just wipe that out. And what I think will come to you is 1 or 2 or 3, however many staff do the actual scoring, whether they're each provided or some sort of a summary or synopsis, you'll get the score, and then I imagine you folks will tackle what to do with that next without having that kind of black and white sort of threshold to have to consider. There was some interest expressed in removing some subjectivity in some of the actual of the 10 indicators. We did take a look at that and we kind of made a black and white subject or more objective score for items 9 and 10. So that change was also reflected in your copy. And then the fourth document that was added is the narrative response form, which is intended for use, either optional or required. I'm not sure how that will play out, but a form for the developer to use to indicate their argument for alignment with those 10 indicators. And open to questions. If they're general, they might come to me. If they're more technical, they might come to others in the audience. So.
Great. Questions from council?
I have one.
Yeah, Dave.
In looking this over and looking at the list of incentives, we have Brownfield and a number of others, which are very good. The thought that occurs to me is that, I guess the question is this list exhaustive, or does this preclude us from considering, within the legal bounds, what's legal, other incentive alternatives? For example, and this is just an example, let's say the city has a piece of property that we feel would be a good location for a residential or some sort of development, housing development. And a thought occurs to someone, what about a long-term lease of that property as an incentive to move the project along? Because cost of real estate seems to be a major hurdle for a lot of these projects. Just as an example, is that something that we could consider, or something similar to that?
Yeah.
I know I'm coming out of the blue with this.
Yep. And again, I think it was clarified 2 months ago that there's sort of the planning component to this tool, and then there's the addressing the actual financial incentive options, and that kind of falls more towards the second floor rather than the third floor. So I think that might be a Keith question more so than for me. Is that right?
Yeah, so Dave, I'm gonna do 2 things on that. One, the example that you used, and I know that was just an example and not meant to be exhaustive either. But when we get to real estate, what I would say is that probably would trigger a whole nother set of legal reviews that you probably remember. Some of those is that we went through with 36th Street, for example, where what we can and can't do with real estate, there's a lot of limitations in charter and state law and otherwise. So we'd probably look at it more so from those abilities / limitations. And probably it's we need to have a formal process and we need to get fair market value. And you'll probably remember Ron talking about, well, there's different ways that you can interpret that value, but to some extent, there is a pretty strong financial component in that. So I think we'd have to look at maybe a specific idea, but we'd probably look at it more from that perspective of evaluation rather than this. And then as it relates to kind of other, really this falls pretty squarely in the realm of what we're authorized to do, again, under state law rather than something we can make up. I'm gonna call on our new consultant maybe to answer your question as to if this is an exhaustive list or if there's other things from the
Pass on the
state.
buck already, right?
Yeah, so we're gonna put them on the spot right away. I think I know the answer, but I'm gonna have him answer it. And I'll tell you later if I was right.
Dave, I think your question's right on, and for the most part, this is an exhaustive list of the tools that we have available to us today that are most likely to be used for the purpose that we kind of created the tool for. So it's not necessarily exhaustive in terms of every potential incentive under the sun, but as we think about specifically housing and neighborhoods and residential development, as well as some of our business incentives, this is, for the most part, the tools that are available today. The thing that I'll say on top of that is, if I put my other hat on right now as Housing Next, we're working with a coalition of groups from across the state to put together a package of legislative bills that we hope will go to the legislature sometime early 2021 to create some additional tools that will be entirely optional to local units of government, but will make it easier to do some of the things that we really want to be able to do. An example of that would be, I think over the last 10 or 15 years, City of Holland has done a really great job of promoting homeownership and converting multi-unit rentals back to single family. Partners for Renewal and Jubilee has done really extraordinary work in that realm. We're getting to the point where the pendulum is swinging the other way, right? Where we need to be able to preserve some of those older rental stock. But there's no great incentive to encourage a landlord to do that. There is an incentive for them to sell as a single-family home, or for them to say, hey, I can increase my rents by $300 this year because the market will bear it. We're talking about some tools to allow local units of government to essentially put an incentive in place that's very similar to the Commercial Rehabilitation Act or the Obsolete Property Rehabilitation Act, that would allow for an incentive based on the investment that a landlord puts in and conditioned upon some level of affordability, so that instead of paying the full non-PRE, non-homestead tax liability, they would get a reduced tax obligation in exchange for the affordability in their investment. So there will be more tools at some point, and we'll amend the document, right? So I think we designed this with a lot of Mark's help and support to be sure that it was a living document that was responding to the needs of the city year by year. And in any given year, I think we're going to encourage City Council to take a look and refresh it and say, are we still getting all of these metrics right? And based on what we're seeing in the field and bringing back to you in terms of those metrics, do you want to adjust anything in the policy? We kind of designed this to have multiple dials that we can dial up or dial down depending on the response of the market.
Good. Well, I appreciate that. Also, good to hear about some of these other efforts. We have been known to change the rules or work to change the rules when we've had to in the past. My only concern, I guess, in bringing that up at all is that I would hate to see us lose our creative thinking when it comes to possibilities, because we all know there's plenty of challenges in accomplishing a lot of these things. So thanks for your answer.
Yeah.
And your answer.
I would have had that answer, it just wouldn't have been as good as what Ryan said, so.
Way to give the new guy a chance.
I will say, though, I think one of the changes that we made with your encouragement, which I think is absolutely the right thing, and both Mark and Ryan have hit on it, where we've moved away from kind of like, okay, is it a 3 or is it a 5? And if you total it up and it's a 26, then you get this. And if it was a 27, then sorry, you would have, like, I just don't think that, kind of along your comments, Dave, I think this fits reality much more. and it allows for some of that, not total flexibility that we're just flying in the dark, right? But I think these were really good changes. So I think they're ready for prime time, and definitely eventually with a head nod from all of you, what we're looking for is that we would put this on an upcoming agenda, maybe even next week, and that we would ask you to approve this, and we'd start putting it to use. And I think one of the reasons is because we're starting to see, you know, a lot of these projects coming in. So the timing is good too, because I think then we can start using this to evaluate possibilities that are in the pipeline.
Any other questions from council? Nod of the heads. Oh, Lynn, yes.
Yeah, yes, I just wanted to say thank you, Mark, and for everybody else who working. I know Ryan has been working on this a long time too. I think it's really great. I think that you have incorporated all of well, I don't want to say suggestions, but really addressed the concerns that we talked about the last time, and I really appreciate the final document. I think what would be really great is if we could somehow better inform the community about strategies that we have in place to encourage affordable housing. I mean, there's obviously more to that. This is a development tool, but also it incorporates affordable housing, and I think that it would be helpful if there was some, I don't know if we're talking about a landing page on the website or somewhere that we could direct people who want to know what's happening with housing in Holland, and to be able to put that all in one place. And at the same time, really think about coming up with a plan, a long-term plan, a comprehensive plan for housing in particular. So we're definitely putting the pieces together, but so those are just two things that I think would be really helpful. So when people ask me, what's happening with housing, I kind of pick these little pieces of it rather than saying, hey, if you go to our website, you can see all the stuff that the city's doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, Mark has done a great job coordinating all of this, and he's been a great addition to the team.
Anyone else? Wonderful, thank you. Thanks, Mark, thanks, Ryan, and Keith. Yeah, I guess thanks to you too.
Wow.
Well, you know, you did have the answer, but didn't share it with us until Ryan did, so. Next item on the agenda, establishment of the local brownfield redevelopment fund.
Yes, I'm not going to say much. I'm just going to let Tim and Lynn kind of co-promote this. And we also have, I think, just one. Yeah, we have one member of our brownfield board here also that's interested in this. So it looks like Lynn's going to talk first. And Lynn's doing a great job, by the way. We're really happy to have her.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Box and members of the City Council. Tonight I would like to just provide you with some information on what a local brownfield revolving fund is, and then Tim's going to share a little insight on how we might be able to use that at the city. At recent meetings, the local Holland Brownfield Redevelopment Authority has discussed establishing this type of fund, and at their October 7th meeting, they did pass a resolution supporting the establishment of this, of course subject to council approval. So what is a local brownfield revolving fund? Well, Michigan Public Act 380, in excess of once all the eligible expenses have been paid for, and they can do this for an additional 5 years. So these captured funds can then actually be used to benefit other projects in the city. So what could what type of projects could these funds be used for? So again, the Michigan Public Act governs the eligible uses of the fund, but some of the things they can be used for is they could do immediate reimbursements to developers for approved eligible cost, instead of like now we wait till we accumulate the funds and reimburse them. Or we could use these funds for public infrastructure projects in future brownfield project areas. So when we were working on this process, we actually reached out to our representative at the state, and they provided us with some details on this type of fund, and actually gave us some contacts at both the cities of Grand Rapids and Grand Haven, who have successfully used this type of fund to support initiatives throughout their city. So I'm going to turn it over to Tim now, who's going to provide a little more information on the timing of this effort and some more examples of how it might benefit the city.
Mr. Finance Director Emeritus.
Wow. So, this has existed in the law always. It wasn't, it's not a new add to the law. It's been there before. The city of Holland has not previously implemented this idea, or we've not created this fund. And so why would we start that now, right? Why did we start today? And this was really the genesis of the idea. It's been around a long time. In my mind, we've never made a lot of sense necessarily in the timing. However, the Baker Lofts projects now has completed its capture. The developer has been reimbursed in full. All right, so when you first approved that plan, we anticipated capture through the year of 2030 for that plan. However, we finished that reimbursement in 2020, which was amazing. The taxable value increased faster, which meant that the developer was able to be reimbursed more quickly. Well, currently, if we were to create this revolving fund, we could use those funds from the Baker Lofts project and utilize those and accumulate funds to utilize for things like Waterfront Holland. Let's say we need to reroute the road, or we need to do some significant infrastructure improvements there. We could use the funds from this fund and apply those towards those costs today. And then we can reimburse ourselves back for those, reimburse the fund back for those costs in the future. So this does allow for some working capital, if you will, to function and flow. We can reimburse developers for their costs, or we can utilize it for a public infrastructure. We are suggesting that we would look into developing policies of the days ahead. We aren't going to spend this money tomorrow. It'll start accumulating. We believe just from the Baker Lofts project that we'll be able to generate in excess of $200,000 a year in the local TIF. So that means in that 5-year cycle into the future, we would have the ability to retain in excess of $1 million that we can apply then towards some of these other kinds of projects, and then recover those funds back again into this fund. So we think it makes good sense. Now the Brownfield Board concurred. They felt like that was a good idea. We first discussed that in the July meeting, and they said, yes, please, let's bring that back for action in a future meeting, which we were going to have shortly. And then they unanimously approved that at our meeting last week. So we think it makes sense. We think it's a good use of resources that we can take advantage. We've got lots of big public infrastructure needs in the future. Like I said, we could reimburse developers for their costs. That isn't necessarily the strategy that I have in mind. I won't be here to develop that strategy, and the policies will be developed in my absence because we will develop those policies over the next period of time, I'm sure with Ryan's help and with Lynn's help, and figure out exactly how that would work. But that's what we're thinking makes sense. If council chooses, and I'll be quiet and let you ask some questions, but should council choose to approve this, we will put this, or if it looks like we want to proceed this for the next council agenda, we'll put it there. We will also then, on that same meeting, amend the Baker Lofts Brownfield plan to say we plan to capture monies for another 5 years into the local Brownfield revolving fund. Keep in mind that the taxing jurisdictions are going to get their money 5 years earlier than what we had previously approved, even with this plan. They would be getting those funds earlier. They'd be getting them immediately if that were not the case. There's a lot more detail I can give you. In Brownfield funding, the schools are made whole. However, it does impact the other taxing jurisdictions. So it doesn't capture debt, but it does impact the Maxton, the library, the ISD, and those governing agencies, and the city's general funds as well. All right, I'll be quiet.
Yeah, questions from council? Yeah, Mike.
Well, that lends to a very important important question then, Tim. Have the other entities been told that we're looking at this? Because it's gonna, you're absolutely correct. In this particular case, they're gonna get their money 5 years earlier. But they could potentially get it 10 years earlier.
At this point in time, Mike, this has not been presented to the other taxing jurisdictions. It's Ron's belief that this plan can be amended without a public hearing, but certainly it's not something we necessarily are trying to do in the dark, and we certainly can notify them.
Other questions? Yeah, Keith?
And I think that's a good question, Mike. I will go back though, because it's a discussion and a debate that Tim and I have had too. And I think quite frankly, the lead in that he gave about Baker Lofts, in that we used this tool once upon a time and we thought that it was going to be until 2030 before it paid off, and we did it in 2020, is really a great argument that the tool works the way it's supposed to, and that it actually brings a property, because we're making an investment that quite possibly would not have been otherwise made, and that it's really for the long-term benefit of everybody. Now, we get that on the edges, sometimes there's kind of that short term, like, well, I'd want my money now, right? But I think the example that Tim used really almost proves the point of it's just exactly the right thing, long-term thing to do. And I know you're maybe not debating that, you're just asking a question, but just as a perspective, I would encourage that's, I think, really the cornerstone that Tim and I kept coming back to of why we think this is just the right thing to do for everyone.
And I'm not disagreeing with that. My point being is that the transparency of this, the taxing jurisdictions more than likely have not budgeted for this for another 10 years, so it's not like they're going to need the money right now, albeit with the times that we have, they may welcome it. But
Absolutely.
just saying, okay, we're looking to make things better here, understanding this, that, and the other thing. We want to be fully transparent. This is what we're going to do. You're going to get your money, in this particular case, potentially 5 years earlier, but let's just have the transparency there. I wasn't trying to make any accusations that anybody was trying to do this under board or anything like that. Just, let's get it out there, let everybody know what's going on, and we can probably have a better partnership later on down the road with some of these other things coming up in brownfield land.
Yeah. Other questions from council? Yeah, Mike, I'm going to echo what you said. I know you've got a long-term relationship with Max, which would be affected by this. I had a long-term relationship with the library board, and I remember every time one of these came through, we all kind of looked at each other and went, well, we don't have much control over this. Yeah, the eye roll is exactly right. Well, all right, we'll just adapt to that. But I do think it's important for the relationships with those other organizations that we have as much transparency with this as well. And I have one other question. Are we only looking at doing this in the Baker Lofts kind of situations where the payoff is earlier than it was before? And if that was in the report, I apologize, I missed it. So are we looking at just in these situations where the payoff's earlier and we've got that 5 years that we weren't anticipating being able to having it be paid off in that amount of time? Or are we looking at doing it in other projects as well?
So we believe the Baker Lofts plan needs to be amended to accomplish that. So that will take a specific action of council to do that. The most recent plans that council has approved, including the GDK block and another one, identified the possibility of putting funds into the local anyway, I get my acronyms messed up. The local revolving brownfield fund. So they specifically called that out as if we may proceed that direction. The earlier plans pretty much said we don't necessarily intend to do that. So the way the new plans have been written, I would say we do not need to take any further action. The older plans we will have to act on, and I would envision acting on, I'm trying to think of what else is coming up that would be of significant value. It's probably Baker Lofts, Scrapyard, although Scrapyard's quite a ways out yet before the developer is reimbursed in full. So that will take an action of council at that time. Most of the other ones are pretty small dollar amounts, and we certainly could bring them back to council. for action, and that's something, a decision you'll face in the future. But the more recent plans have all anticipated this as a more likely probability.
And you would see that if you recall, remember when we do this, a lot of times you get this really nice long kind of Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah,
with
and I've
a bunch of
memorized most of those
columns,
spreadsheets,
And
so
I know
yes.
that you memorize those,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor. In those spreadsheets, in the most recent ones, we have right in there, because it is allowed by law, that we would have the ability to establish and capture this. So that was part of, I guess I'd call it the pro forma, that was part of the original adoption in, how long have we been doing that, Tim, for?
20, it was
last-
created in 2003. So, but I would say that it even calls out the amounts in the reports.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So maybe the question I asked was more basic, and it's kind of going over your guys' heads because you're in the weeds with it a little bit. Let me give you a specific example based on what you said, and you answered a question that I had that wasn't the one that I had thought I'd asked. So let's say with the GDK block. GDK block, if the timing on that repayment is what was initially anticipated, in other words, it's paid off in the amount of time that we anticipated, do we have the ability to be able to extend for another 5 years beyond the original with this? Or is it only in those circumstances where the payoff is earlier than what was anticipated?
we do have the ability to extend it beyond the original term. So had Bakerlof been paid off in 2030, the developer, we could have gone to 2035.
That's exactly the answer that I was wanting to hear. Okay, yeah, that's not agreeing one way or the other with that, but just I needed that clarification in terms of the way the process worked. Okay. Other questions from council? And are you looking for a head nod on this? Because I possibility of bringing it to agenda next week?
Although what I'm hearing is maybe instead of putting that on the agenda next week, that we'd have some form of communication to our taxing entity partners, just to, not just inform them, but
Get some input?
let them know kind of the why behind we're looking at doing it in a partnership fashion. So what that would mean is that we wouldn't be putting it on an immediate agenda because we'd want to give some time to have that communication.
I'm seeing
that
some
what I'm
head nods
hearing?
around the table that I think that's probably a good idea to reach out to those other partners and have that communication.
The last piece of that would be that it does need to be acted on before the end of this calendar year.
Okay. And I think there's probably time to be able to do that.
I would think we have plenty of time.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Next item, review of the 2021 business plan quarterly update. Mr. Van Beek?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Council, since typically there's always comments that inaccuracies about the time that it is and that we're running longer than time, you'll notice that we're doing better than time tonight. And
I almost said
I'm
something about
guessing
that.
that you all don't mind
Yeah.
that. If you want, I can go through this in great detail and talk about every box. That was not my pre-plan, however. What I wanted to do is just give this to you so you could review this. This is what, the 4th or 5th time now that we've done this in a quarterly plan review. Really, the only things that I would review and that I'd be available to questions are, you will see probably more yellow boxes than normal. And really, that's just because it's not that I wake up in the middle of the night or can't fall asleep at night. And yet, the longer that the COVID pandemic extends, quite honestly, the more I worry about future impacts of how that's going to have an inevitable trickle-down impact on our revenues, and then because of that, how we provide services to residents. And not a big surprise, I think, to any of you, but what we found is the services that we provide to residents, think police, fire, parks, transportation. I don't think Kathy has ever been as busy in her life as she is right now, and her eyes just demonstrated that, right? Like, we're probably busier than ever, right, of a demand from citizens of wanting our services. And yet I do have that out-year concern about our finances. So you'll continue to see me, you know, not terrified or anything. They're not red, but they're yellow, where we're going to continue to just have that concern and take early actions just to be conservative as it relates to that. So we're okay, but we're cautious. And other than that, I really just need to say, just doing the exercise of this periodically and sending out to the leadership team, like, hey, go through the business plan. That's one of the reasons that we have it in place, right? Go through the business plan, remind yourself on what the priorities are and what we're supposed to be working on. It's always just really pleasant to go through that and get all the feedback from staff, and then, quite frankly, kind of try to narrow that down to fit it in the small little boxes. But it really is, at least for me and hopefully for you, just an indicator of how much work we've already done, and this is just the first quarter report. So I think this is a really positive report. Points to what, you know, even in the midst of things, there's a lot of work getting done, a lot of progress getting made. And with that, I will be quiet and be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. Questions, comments from council? Nikki?
Yeah, it seems one of your yellow means there's some risk on goal number 1.7. The assistant city manager, it seems instead of going forward to actively interview or consider that, we're kind of spreading that out. You know, we have Ryan, we have the ODC, outdoor.
Outdoor
ODC.
discovery, yeah, and they're kind of doing this.
And so they're doing a little sustainability, there's some so is that kind of the direction we're moving in? Instead of having one person as envisioned, as I thought was envisioned, we're kind of moving these tasks around?
For right now, and especially with the expertise that we have in Ryan, I feel comfortable that we're getting the expertise we need to deal with what we have facing us right now. And yet, I think this is absolutely the right decision, because it once you hire a person and the benefits and everything that comes along with this, I just think this is the right move for now, and then we can certainly hope that we can reevaluate that in the future. But I think we're meeting our needs right now too, largely because we've got a person that really can step in and just has a high level of expertise that can fit what we're looking to get.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Yeah, the only one I have, I don't think in any other year, item 1.1, council adopted a balanced budget in May, would be a yellow item. But I think that plays into what Nikki was just saying as well, that there is, I think, a need for some fiscal prudence here and making sure that we're keeping our cards close to our vest and not reaching beyond with the uncertainties that are certain to come over the next couple of years in the budget process, especially on the revenue end of things. So I applaud you for that, for being conservative in that regard and to finances with the city and trying to fill in, and as Nikki, as you're saying, covering some things in ways that may not be as much of a financial obligation long-term for the city, because we frankly just don't know necessarily what's coming over the next couple of years. Yeah, so thank you for that. Yeah, any other questions or comments? And we are 26 minutes ahead of schedule, unless you've got some other business. Mr. Trethewey is keeping a tally, and he's going to put those 26 minutes in the under column for you, so that you've made up some time from other meetings. So,
well, I think
congratulations on that.
2:25 in the morning meeting, is that held against me? I'm not
I'm
sure.
I'm not sure that one went on your ledger.
Okay.
So. All right.
Yeah, and just process-wise, then we will have a step that this would be on consent agenda next week, because I think it's important to additionally take the step where you're actually approving these quarterly.
Sounds good. Anything else from council? Otherwise, we can adjourn. Looks good. We're adjourned. Thank you.